All right, class, it's time for week 2 as of our foray into the book of Hebrews, where we'll have a little bit of a focus on Moses. One thing you'll notice is the better than theme that begins to play out in the book. And that can create kind of a false image in our head because it's not so much better than in the sense that one is completely done away with and replaced. It's more of a continuation of building upon. So it's never about diminishing the one that came before as much as it is about adding more completeness. So as you begin to work through this week's readings, we'll start with reading through chapters 3 and 4. Pay attention in chapter 3 to the comparisons made between Moses and Jesus, where Moses is a faithful servant and Jesus is a faithful son. And the notion of sonship is actually quite a big theme in the text of Scripture, particularly being a firstborn son. So that's kind of a point that we want to keep in the back of our heads. And you'll notice there's a warning, and with every warning is also a call. So a warning not to do this, which is inherently a call to do this. And then you'll kind of notice that one of the themes that begins to play out is that spiritual privilege does not equal receiving a promise. Simply because you were born a child of Israel, an Israelite, or because you had an initial experience with God, or at some point you came to faith as this group of people once did, that does not mean it's all done, taken care of. You receive the promise. No, there's a definite call to perseverance. So the author of Hebrews is making a call that's implicit within the text. As you continue reading through Hebrews 3 and 4, notice there's 3 types of rest that get mentioned. God's rest after creation, Israel's rest in the promised land under Joshua, which is also Yeshua, which is actually the same name for Jesus, because that is Jesus' name. God is my salvation. So there's some wordplay that's happening here as well, and that there's a greater rest still available to God's people. So the author is reminding them who they are and reminding them of what they're aimed at. As you continue to work through the reading, remember there's a call to believe, a call to obey, a call to persevere. And you should hear kind of implicitly within this call the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And the word hear is more than just an auditory recognition of something. It is inherently that you hear and obey. So there is a hearing and an obedience, and to obey means to persevere. So it is a call to action that's being placed in the readings. And ultimately, what you're going to get at is this is a author who's trying to remind the children of Israel of who they are. It's a people who have become unaware of who God originally and initially called them to be. And so this is a sermon that's being written to call them back to a place of identity. And at the root of the gospel, it's always a question of identity. And then think about, as you're listening to the author begin to work between two worlds, you're going to hear echoes in his sermon a lot that reaches back into the Old Testament. And so what the author is doing is, rather than in like the book of Ephesians when Paul writes, he gives like explanation and then exhortation. In the book of Hebrews, it's more of like an echo. It's more of a looping where you're like, hear this, hear this, hear this. And it kind of back and forth. You go from old to new to something different, back to old to new. And it creates kind of a layered effect of taking you back and forth in between the worlds. And what the author is trying to do by going back and forth to the worlds is he's trying to remind his audience that who you are is deeply enmeshed and enrooted in where you come from. And so there's a history behind your identity, and it's in that history and a return to that history and a recognition of who you are that helps propel you to that perseverance that's needed so that you can continue to become the person you're supposed to be and end up where God has truly aimed you at. So enjoy the readings and the discussion posts this week. Look forward to our interactions.